Lieutenant Soren Kalam stared at the sensors with barely disguised boredom. The Ocean 12 observation station, positioned at the furthest edge of the Rubicon Galactic Alliance, had all the charm of a rusty crate floating in eternal monotony. Assigned here 6 standard months ago, he had come to terms with the absolute lack of excitement that characterized border duty. Lieutenant Kalam, your shift ends in 27 minutes and 14 seconds, announced the station's AI assistant, Madame Celesta, with her signature tone of sardonic politeness. Perhaps you'd like to use this time to review the 59 unread regulation updates from Central Command, or maybe address your cholesterol levels, which have risen 3% since last week's synthetic bacon incident. Soren snorted. I'm savoring those regulation updates like a fine vintage, Madame Celesta. Wouldn't want to rush through bureaucratic poetry. Your dedication to professional growth is truly inspiring, the AI replied, her holographic form materializing beside his console, a shimmering blue presence shaped like a stern librarian from some ancient world. Almost as inspiring as your dedication to ignoring your medical recommendations. Soren was about to counter with a witty retort when a notification flashed across his screen. Then another, and another. 1 to 7 black holes. He muttered, fingers suddenly alert as they danced across the interface. Madame Celesta's tone shifted instantly. Anomalous signal detected. Bearing sector R192.44. Object approaching at. Recalculating. That can't be right, Soren said, rechecking the readings. Nothing moves that fast. Run diagnostics. Diagnostics complete. All systems functioning at optimal capacity, Madame Celesta reported, her voice modulation suggesting the AI equivalent of perplexed concern. Unknown ship detected. No data. No origin. And it's too fast. Too fast indeed. According to every reading, the object was moving at speeds that shattered the established limits of faster-than-light travel by orders of magnitude. The Rubicon Alliance's most advanced military vessels could push the boundaries of physics to achieve remarkable FTL speeds. But this was something else entirely. I need to report this, Soren said, authorizing an emergency communication channel to Rubicon Alliance headquarters on Aurelia Prime. Madame Celesta's hologram flickered with what appeared to be amusement. Shall I use the standard 17-step reporting procedure? Or would you prefer the special 18-step emergency protocol that includes the additional urgent situation validation form that nobody reads? Full emergency protocols, Soren confirmed, ignoring her sarcasm. And mark it maximum priority. He began drafting the message, careful to include every precise measurement and calculation. This wasn't the time for his usual flippancy. Something truly unprecedented was happening. And for once, his overactive imagination wasn't responsible. Message compiled, Madame Celesta announced. Commencing transmission through official channels. Estimated arrival at appropriate authority after standard bureaucratic bouncing. Approximately 7 hours and 42 minutes. 7 hours? Can't we expedite? We could, the AI replied. If someone hadn't used the emergency expedited communication allowance last month to order that absolutely essential vintage comic collection from the Procyon system. Soren winced. That was a limited edition. And now, so is our priority communication privilege. The message began its journey through the labyrinthine communication networks of the Rubicon Alliance, bouncing between departments like a misguided ball in a cosmic soccer match, lacking only a referee to pull out a red card for procedural fouls. First, it landed at Sector Security Assessment, who forwarded it to Border Threat Analysis, who bounced it to Unidentified Object Classification, who redirected it to Non-Standard Phenomenon Evaluation, who sent it onward to Advanced Technology Detection, who decided it belonged in Potential Alien Contact Protocol, who determined it required velocity anomaly verification, who pushed it to Scientific Improbability Committee, who escalated it to the Defense Readiness Council, who passed it to the Strategic Intelligence Division, who transferred it to the High Command Initial Review Board, who expedited it to Naval Fleet Command, who redirected it to Immediate Threat Response, who channeled it to External Relations Crisis Management, who concluded it should go to the Galactic Intelligence Bureau, who finally marked it for the Imperial Council's urgent consideration. By the time Soren's message reached actual decision-makers, he had consumed 3 cups of synthetic coffee, drafted 2 hypothetical scenarios for first contact protocols, and beaten Madame Celesta at virtual chess exactly 0 times. Message delivered to Galactic Intelligence Bureau. Madame Celesta informed him. They seemed marginally more concerned than when you reported that space jellyfish migration last spring. The jellyfish were real, Soren protested. They were gas pockets from a decomposing asteroid belt. They moved in formation. Random current patterns. They glowed. Solar reflection. Soren waved away the debate with feigned indignation. The point is, this is different. These readings are impossible. He gestured toward the display where the object continued its relentless approach. And if this thing maintains its current velocity, it will cross the Rubicon border in exactly 36 standard hours. Madame Celesta completed his sentence, her tone suddenly devoid of any humor. And Lieutenant, I should note that while I frequently question your dietary choices and recreational priorities, I never question your observational skills. This is indeed quite impossible, and therefore quite concerning. For a moment, the station fell silent as human and artificial intelligence contemplated the implications of what they were witnessing. Something was coming, something that defied understanding. And very soon, the Rubicon Alliance would need to decide how to respond. As if reading his thoughts, Madame Celesta added softly, I've taken the liberty of adding a final note to your report. May the bureaucracy move faster than this object, though I suspect that would require a miracle of physics even greater than what we're currently observing. The Grand Council chamber of Aurelia Prime glittered with all the ostentatious splendor expected of a galactic empire's heart. Holographic displays swirled with star charts and data streams, while representatives from 17 major planetary systems and 32 autonomous colonies shifted uncomfortably in their ornate seats. The emergency session had been called with such haste that several dignitaries still wore their formal nightwear beneath hastily donned ceremonial robes. Esteemed members of the Rubicon Alliance, began Queen Celestia IV, her elaborate headdress bobbing dangerously with each syllable. As we gather on this most significant of occasions, let us first acknowledge the enduring majesty of our collective civilization, which has weathered the storms of cosmic calamity, interstellar dispute, and administrative budget cuts with equal measures of dignity and resourcefulness. General Aldrax, Supreme Commander of the Rubicon Defense Forces, drummed his fingers on the metallic table. The Queen's introductory speeches were notorious for their length and inverse relationship to actual content. His cybernetic eye twitched, a sign his patient subroutine was being severely tested. If I may interject, Your Majesty, he said, voice like gravel being crushed. We face an immediate potential threat. Perhaps we could abbreviate the ceremonial aspects and address the anomaly directly. Queen Celestia's smile remained fixed, but a slight narrowing of her eyes suggested that General Aldrax had just earned himself an extra tax audit this fiscal quarter. Of course, General, she conceded with practiced grace. Let us indeed turn our attention to the mysterious vessel approaching our borders at unprecedented velocities. The Scientific Council will present their preliminary findings. Professor Govina, head of the Rubicon Scientific Council, stood slowly. Unlike most present, she wore neither ornate regalia nor military decoration. Just a simple blue tunic with dozens of pockets filled with various analytical devices, data crystals, and at least 3 half-eaten protein bars. What we're observing defies our current understanding of propulsion physics, she said without preamble. We've established a direct link with Observation Station Ocean 12. Lieutenant Kalam, the officer who first detected the anomaly, will brief us directly. A holographic projection flickered to life in the center of the chamber. Soren appeared, looking slightly disheveled, but attempting to maintain military bearing. Beside him hovered the translucent form of Madame Celesta. Lieutenant Soren Kalam reporting, Your Majesty, Honored Council, he said, offering a salute that was approximately 3 degrees off standard regulation form. Approximately 26 hours ago, our sensors detected an object approaching Rubicon space at velocities exceeding established FDL limitations by a factor of 17. General Aldrax leaned forward. 17? That's impossible. Hence the emergency session, General. Madame Celesta interjected before Soren could respond. Impossible things tend to warrant attention. A murmur rippled through the council chamber. AIs weren't typically programmed to be sarcastic to military leadership. Soren cleared his throat. The vessel, if it is indeed a vessel, emits no identification signal. It matches no known design in our databases. It responds to no communication attempts across all standard and non-standard frequencies. And you're certain this isn't a sensor malfunction? Asked one of the colonial representatives. We've run 37 diagnostic cycles, Soren confirmed. The readings are consistent and verified. Queen Celestia looked troubled beneath her composed exterior. What are the options before us, General Aldrax? The general stood, activating a tactical display that overshadowed Soren's hologram. We must assume hostile intent. I propose immediately dispatching the 7th Fleet to intercept and, if necessary, eliminate this potential threat before it reaches our borders. Eliminate? Professor Irvina raised an eyebrow. You propose firing upon an unknown entity that might represent a technologically superior civilization? One capable of velocities we can't even comprehend? That seems unwise. Unwise is waiting until they're in weapons range of our core systems, Aldrax countered. If they can travel that fast, another counselor noted, they could already be in weapons range if they wished. The chamber erupted into overlapping arguments. Some voiced support for diplomatic approaches, others for defensive posturing, while a small faction, led by a representative from the mercantile planets, suggested offering exclusive trade rights to whoever made first contact. During this chaos, Soren's hologram flickered as the transmission experienced interference. When stabilized, he appeared to be engaged in a hushed argument with Madame Celesta. And I'm telling you, she was saying, their response is precisely why we have 17 layers of bureaucracy. Imagine if decisions got made quickly. We'd have intergalactic incidents before breakfast. Realizing they were back online, Soren's eyes widened. Apologies for the transmission issues, Council. Queen Celestia raised her hand, silencing the chamber. Lieutenant, what is your assessment of this situation? You were first to observe this anomaly. Soren hesitated, clearly surprised to be asked his opinion. I believe caution is warranted, Your Majesty. But I also believe that true threats rarely announce themselves, so, obviously, this vessel, whatever it is, makes no attempt at stealth. It's as if it wants us to notice it. Or it simply doesn't care if we do, General Aldrax countered. Predators don't hide from prey they know cannot escape. A tense silence fell over the chamber. A compromise, then, the Queen finally declared. We will dispatch a fleet to secure our border, but with strict orders to maintain defensive posture only. Meanwhile, our scientists will continue analysis, and diplomatic protocols will be prepared should communication become possible. General Aldrax will command the response fleet personally. The general nodded stiffly. And the Queen continued. Lieutenant Kalam will be transferred to the command vessel as our liaison. His familiarity with the anomaly's characteristics may prove valuable. Soren's holographic eyes widened. Your Majesty, I have demonstrated admirable attention to detail and measured analysis in a highly unusual situation. She completed his sentence with a finality that brooked no argument. You will report to the flagship Radiant Triumph immediately. As the council session moved to logistical matters, Soren's hologram disappeared. Back on Ocean 12, he turned to Madame Celesta with an expression of pure disbelief. Did I just get promoted or punished? He asked. The AI's holographic form shimmered with what might have been amusement. In Rubicon politics, Lieutenant, those are frequently the same thing. Can I at least bring you with me? My core programming is already being transferred to Radiant Triumph systems, she confirmed. Someone needs to remind you about your cholesterol levels among the stars. Soren began hastily packing his meager personal belongings. At least this beats monitoring empty space for another 6 months. Careful what you wish for, Lieutenant, Madame Celesta cautioned. Empty space never tried to break the laws of physics quite so dramatically. The departure ceremony for the Rubicon Defense Fleet was supposed to be spectacular. The official program promised a magnificent display of Imperial power and unity, with synchronized light arrays, ceremonial fighter formations, and the grand finale, a dazzling fireworks sequence spelling out Glory to Rubicon across the stratosphere. What actually occurred was somewhat less impressive. The light arrays sputtered to half-brightness due to unexpected power conservation protocols. The fighter formation managed 3/4 of its planned pattern before 2 pilots got confused about which way to turn. And the fireworks, purchased at discount from a decommissioned pleasure planet, ignited in a brief, enthusiastic flare before fizzling out after approximately 1.7 seconds. Budget cuts, explained a nearby officer when Soren raised an eyebrow at the underwhelming display. 3rd consecutive year. The ceremonial department now shares funding with sanitation and pest control. That explains the smell, Soren muttered, referring to the distinct odor of industrial cleanser that permeated the Radiant Triumph's observation deck. General Aldrax seemed oblivious to these shortcomings as he addressed the assembled crew. His imposing figure, enhanced by ceremonial armor that added at least 15 centimeters to his already considerable height, dominated the command platform. "We stand as the shield of the Rubicon Alliance," he proclaimed, voice booming through the ship's amplification system. "Whatever this intruder may be, it shall find that crossing our borders means facing the most formidable military force in 17 sectors." The crew responded with appropriate enthusiasm, though Soren noticed several technical officers exchanging skeptical glances. Everyone had seen the sensor readings by now. Whatever was approaching moved in ways their formidable military force couldn't hope to match. Should I prepare the traditional "we're all going to die" speech, or save it for later? Madame Celesta's voice came through Soren's personal communicator, her AI consciousness now fully integrated into the flagship systems. "Let's at least wait until we make visual contact," Soren whispered back, discreetly munching on a packet of synthetic space nuts he'd smuggled from the observation station. "For all we know, it's just a malfunction after all." "Your optimism is endearing, Lieutenant. Statistically improbable, but endearing." The fleet departed with considerably more efficiency than the ceremony had suggested, forming a precise defensive formation as they accelerated to maximum FTL capacity. Even at their impressive speed, intercept calculations showed they would barely reach the border in time to meet the approaching object. 20 hours later, deep in interstellar space, proximity alerts blared across the command deck. "Contact at coordinates R17, announced the sensor officer, her voice tight with tension. "Initial visual confirmation in 3, 2, 1. The main view screen flickered as long-range optical sensors locked onto their target. Silence fell across the command deck as the image resolved. It was unlike anything in Rubicon records. The vessel, if it could be called that, appeared as a sleek, obsidian construct that seemed to both absorb and reflect light in impossible ways. It had no visible propulsion system, no apparent weapons arrays, no recognizable command structure. Its surface bore no markings, no insignia, not even seams or panels to suggest how it had been constructed. "Magnificent," whispered Soren, earning a sharp look from General Aldrax. "Begin standard scanning procedures," the general ordered. "I want to know what it's made of, how it's powered, and where its vulnerable points are." The science officers complied, directing the flagship's advanced sensor arrays toward the mysterious vessel. Almost immediately, their consoles erupted in cascading error messages. "Sir," reported the chief science officer, confusion evident in her voice, "the scanners are... they're returning nonsensical data. It's as if the object exists in a state of quantum uncertainty." Or, Her explanation was cut short as every scanner display simultaneously flashed the same error message. Error 404. Reality not found. What in the seven hells does that mean? Demanded General Aldrax. It means, Madame Celeste's voice emerged from the ship's communication system, that we're attempting to measure something with instruments designed for our understanding of physics. It's like try to weigh a thought or measure the color of happiness. The general scowled at the intrusion, but didn't rebuke the AI. Prepare warning shots. Target a point 5,000 kilometers ahead of the vessel's projected path. Sir, Soren stepped forward, heart pounding. I strongly recommend against taking any action that could be perceived as hostile until we. Your recommendation is noted, Lieutenant. Aldrax cut him off and ignored. Fire. The Radiant Triumph's forward batteries discharged, sending pulses of concentrated energy streaking toward the designated coordinates. What happened next defied explanation. As the energy bolts approached their target, they suddenly curved, changing direction in a graceful arc that no known force could explain. The deadly weapon's fire transformed, colors shifting from angry red to brilliant gold, before dispersing into a harmless shower of light particles that vanished into the void. Did our weapons just turn into fireworks? Someone whispered. Before anyone could respond, a wave of energy, gentle but undeniable, washed over the fleet. Every weapons system across 23 vessels simultaneously powered down. Targeting computers went offline. Missile launch tubes sealed themselves. Even the backup tactical systems refused to initialize. What's happening? Demanded General Aldrax, genuine alarm replacing his usual gruff confidence. We've been pacified, said the weapons officer in disbelief. As if responding to this observation, the mysterious vessel emitted a signal, not through conventional communication channels, but directly into the fleet's central computing network. Three-dimensional symbols appeared on the main view screen, flowing and shifting in patterns that resembled no known language. Can anyone make sense of this? Aldrax asked, frustration evident in his voice. Soren studied the symbols intently. It's not matching any linguistic pattern in our databases. It's almost as if a resonant ping echoed through every ship in the fleet, and suddenly everyone froze. Not in fear, but literally froze, caught in a localized temporal anomaly that suspended everything except consciousness. Crew members found themselves unable to move, speak, or do anything but think and observe as the strange vessel drew closer. For exactly 286 seconds as measured by the ship's chronometers once time resumed its normal flow, the Rubicon fleet remained in this state, helpless, immobile, and forced to confront a humbling reality. Whatever this visitor was, it possessed technology so advanced that the pride of the Rubicon military might as well have been throwing stones at a supernova. When the temporal effect dissipated, leaving the crew disoriented but unharmed, General Aldrax's expression had transformed from belligerent confidence to something much rarer, thoughtful concern. All vessels maintain position, he ordered quietly. No aggressive actions. Lieutenant Kalam, work with the science team. Find some way to interpret that message. As the command deck erupted into activity, several junior officers could be heard lamenting the recent budget cuts to the weapons systems they'd just been forced to acquire from a military surplus sale. One particularly despondent ensign was overheard muttering that he'd just finished paying off his ceremonial sidearm, only to discover it was apparently no more threatening to their visitor than a child's bubble blower. Soren caught Madame Celeste's holographic eye across the deck. For once, the AI seemed to have no sarcastic comment ready. Instead, she projected a private message to his personal terminal. I believe the term humans use in situations like this is we're out of our depth. Though perhaps we're trying to swim in a five-dimensional ocean with water wings would be more accurate. While the Rubicon fleet reeled from their encounter, Professor Irvina hadn't remained idle. Back on Aurelia Prime, she had commandeered an entire wing of the Imperial Science Academy, much to the dismay of researchers whose long-term projects were unceremoniously relocated to broom closets and maintenance corridors. The quantum fluctuation patterns are identical, she muttered, comparing energy readings from the mysterious vessel against an ancient data fragment recovered from the archives. It can't be coincidence. Her assistant, a nervous young physicist named Trellis, peered over her shoulder. But Professor, that data is from the vanished archives. Those records were deemed unreliable thousands of years ago. Unreliable or deliberately suppressed? Irvina countered, not looking up from her analysis. History written by victors is rarely complete, and science curated for convenience rarely remains accurate. The data in question had come from a civilization long extinct. The primordials, who had supposedly achieved technological wonders before disappearing from the galaxy some 15,000 years ago. Most historians dismissed accounts of their achievements as exaggeration or myth, but Irvina had always been fascinated by the fragments of evidence that occasionally surfaced. Look here, she pointed to a particular energy signature pattern. What we're observing isn't conventional FTL travel at all. The vessel isn't moving through normal space at impossible speeds. It's taking shortcuts through what the primordials call hyperreality fold. That's just theoretical, Trellis stammered. So is faster-than-light travel, until it wasn't, Irvina replied. The primordials apparently discovered that our reality is just one layer of a multidimensional construct. By folding these layers, think of it as creating a wormhole, but through dimensional planes rather than space-time, they could traverse vast distances almost instantaneously. Trellis looked skeptical. If such technology existed, why did the primordials vanish? And why hasn't any civilization since rediscovered it? Irvina's expression darkened. That's where things get interesting. According to these fragments, the primordials developed something called Project Nightstep, an experimental vessel designed to navigate the hyperreality fold. But they built it for a specific purpose, to escape some kind of cosmic threat. She pulled up another data set, this one even more fragmented and corrupted. There are references here to something called the Great Devourer, an entity or phenomenon that existed outside conventional reality and threatened to consume entire dimensions. Project Nightstep was supposedly carrying something that could seal this threat away. And you think our mysterious visitor, Trellis began, is Project Nightstep? Yes, returning after thousands of years. Irvina straightened up, a mixture of scientific excitement and dread dawning on her face. And if it's back, one has to wonder if what it was fleeing from has also returned. She immediately opened a secure channel to the Radiant Triumph. I need to speak with General Aldrax immediately, and connect Lieutenant Kalam to this briefing as well. When the connection established, she wasted no time on pleasantries. General, I've identified our visitor. It's called Project Nightstep, and it may be the only thing standing between us and complete annihilation. Back aboard the Radiant Triumph, Soren had made his own breakthrough. Working with Madame Celesta, he had identified patterns in the three-dimensional symbols transmitted by the mysterious vessel. It's not a language per se, he explained to a group of bewildered communication specialists. It's a representation of multidimensional concepts that can't be adequately expressed in linear communication. Like trying to explain color to someone who can only see in black and white, Madame Celesta added, her holographic form manipulating the symbols to demonstrate their relationships. Or describing a cube to someone who can only perceive two dimensions. General Aldrax, who had been uncharacteristically quiet since the temporal freeze incident, frowned. Can you decipher any of it? Not decipherment in the traditional sense, Soren admitted. But Madame Celesta has developed an algorithm that translates the conceptual framework into something we can roughly understand. Before he could elaborate, an urgent communication from Aurelia Prime interrupted them. Professor Irvina's face appeared on the main view screen, lined with worry and excitement in equal measure. General, Lieutenant, I've identified our visitor. It's called Project Nightstep, an experimental vessel created by the primordials thousands of years ago. And I believe it's here because something called the Great Devourer has returned, a threat from outside our dimensional reality. Soren felt a chill run through him. Professor, that matches what we've begun to extract from their message. There are repeated conceptual clusters that translate roughly to outside predator and dimensional breach. For nearly an hour, the two teams shared findings, piecing together a terrifying picture. The Primordials had created Project Nightstep as both escape vessel and weapon, carrying something called the Reality Seal, a technology that could close breaches between dimensions. The vessel had been lost in a hyperreality fold for millennia, perhaps trapped in a dimensional pocket or caught in some kind of temporal distortion. Now it had returned, apparently seeking allies against a threat about to break through into their reality. This is speculation. General Aldrax objected, military pragmatism reasserting itself. Based on fragmented ancient data and partial translations of an incomprehensible message. True, Professor Irvina conceded. But consider this. If Project Nightstep wanted to destroy us, it could have done so already. Instead, it neutralized our weapons in the gentlest way possible and attempted communication. What exactly are you suggesting, Professor? The general asked. I'm suggesting we consider cooperating rather than confronting. If this great devourer is real, it threatens not just the Rubicon Alliance, but all reality as we understand it. A tense silence fell over the command deck as everyone contemplated the implications. Sir, Soren finally broke the silence. I believe I can establish a more direct form of communication. Madame Celesta and I have identified patterns in their transmission that suggest they're attempting to calibrate to our cognitive frameworks. With your permission, I'd like to attempt a response using the same symbolic structure. General Aldrax hesitated, then nodded curtly. Proceed, Lieutenant. But make it absolutely clear that any threat to Rubicon security will be met with maximum resistance. I think they've already demonstrated the futility of that position, sir, Soren replied carefully, but I'll convey our strength of resolve. With Madame Celeste's assistance, Soren crafted a response using the three-dimensional symbolic language. It was crude by comparison to the elegant complexity of Project Nightstep's communication, but conveyed basic concepts: acknowledgement, cautious curiosity, conditional cooperation. The response was transmitted directly to the enigmatic vessel. For several long minutes, nothing happened. Then, without warning, a section of reality around Soren and several nearby officers, including Madame Celeste's holographic projection, began to shimmer and distort. What's happening? Demanded General Aldrax, reaching for a sidearm that had been rendered inoperative. I believe, Soren said with remarkable calm, considering the circumstances, we're being invited to parley. Before anyone could respond, the distortion intensified. Soren felt a peculiar sensation, as if his entire being was being unraveled thread by thread, then rewoven into a different pattern. His last conscious thought before reality completely transformed around him was that this experience would make an excellent addition to his collection of outlandish scenarios, if he survived to remember it. The sensation, as Madame Celeste would later describe her mission log, was comparable to being stuffed into a cosmic washing machine set to extra vigorous spin cycle, with a dash of existential vertigo thrown in for good measure. Consciousness returned to Soren in waves, each bringing with it sensations and perceptions that his mind struggled to categorize. Colors existed here that had no names in any Rubicon language, hues that somehow conveyed emotions and concepts simultaneously. Sound behaved like physical objects, forming structures that could be observed from multiple angles. Gravity seemed optional, a suggestion rather than a law. I believe, need to bring you to our Star Forge, Soren summarized. But there's a problem. Our military leadership is cautious. They won't easily grant access to one of our most vital strategic assets. Asterisk understanding. Demonstration of threat required. Temporary neural link acceptable. Asterisk. Before Soren could ask what that meant, his consciousness expanded outward, guided by Project Nightstep's influence. Suddenly, he could perceive beyond the pocket dimension, beyond normal space, to the very edge of reality itself. There, in a region where physics broke down into primal chaos, he saw it, the great devourer. It existed as a wound in the fabric of reality, a spreading void that consumed everything it touched. As he watched, it devoured an entire alternate timeline, erasing billions of lives and thousands of worlds, not with destruction, but with non-existence, leaving nothing but empty possibility where once there had been actual history. When his awareness snapped back to the pocket dimension, Soren found himself on his knees, tears streaming down his face. The other officers appeared similarly affected, even Madame Celeste's holographic form showing signs of distress in her flickering projection. "We have to help," Soren said, his voice hoarse. "Whatever it takes. Asterisk agreement. Return to your vessel. Demonstration will be provided. Cooperation essential. Asterisk." The shifting environment around them began to dissolve, reality rewinding around them like fabric being unstitched. The transition back was less disorienting than their arrival had been, as if Project Nightstep had calibrated the process to their physiological limitations. They rematerialized on the command deck of the Radiant Triumph to find barely 2 minutes had passed, though their experience had seemed to last hours. "Lieutenant Kalam." General Aldrax's voice cut through their disorientation. "Report immediately." As Soren struggled to articulate their experience in terms the general might accept, the main view screen activated independently. What appeared wasn't the mysterious vessel's exterior, but a direct visual feed of the dimensional boundary that Soren had witnessed. The entire command crew watched in horrified silence as the Great Devourer consumed an alternate reality. Not a simulation or representation, but actual footage from beyond conventional space-time. The implications were impossible to ignore. If this entity broke through, their entire universe would suffer the same fate. "By all the ancient stars," whispered General Aldrax, his military bravado temporarily abandoned. "General," Soren said, finding his voice at last, "we need to bring Project Nightstep to the Starforge. It's the only way to stop this." For once, the general didn't argue. While the Radiant Triumph established this unprecedented alliance with Project Nightstep, chaos reigned on Aurelia Prime. News of the dimensional threat had leaked, garbled, and exaggerated, causing widespread panic. Public squares filled with doomsday prophets, emergency supply stockpiling emptied retail outlets, and the Imperial Stock Exchange plummeted to historic lows. Queen Celestia addressed the Empire in a live broadcast, her normally elaborate attire notably subdued in recognition of the crisis. "Citizens of the glorious Rubicon Alliance," she began, "in this hour of uncertainty, we must unite with the same steadfast resolve that has carried our civilization through the ages. Our most brilliant scientists and valiant defenders are coordinating an unprecedented response to this extraordinary challenge." She continued for 17 minutes, offering inspirational rhetoric that managed to sound both deeply concerned and reassuringly optimistic without providing any specific information whatsoever. It was, political analysts agreed, a masterclass in saying absolutely nothing while appearing to say everything. Meanwhile, Professor Irvina had transformed the Science Academy's main laboratory into a chaotic war room. Holographic models of the Star Forge filled the central space, surrounded by frantically working researchers attempting to calculate the optimal modifications needed to interface with Project Nightstep's ancient technology. "We need to convert the primary collection array to handle dimensional energy rather than just stellar radiation," she explained to a team of increasingly caffeinated engineers. "The polarity adjustment alone will require reconfiguring 6,000 individual nodes. That would normally take weeks," objected the chief engineer. "We have less than 7 days," Irvina replied grimly, "so I suggest you get creative." As preparations accelerated across the Empire, General Aldrax faced his own challenge, explaining to the Rubicon High Command why he was escorting an incomprehensible alien artifact to one of their most valuable strategic installations rather than destroying it as originally ordered. "I understand your concerns," he told the assembled admirals and generals, his expression suggesting he'd rather be facing an antimatter cannon than this particular conversation. but I've witnessed indisputable evidence of a threat that makes our petty territorial disputes look like children squabbling over toys. This isn't about politics or protocol. It's about survival. The uncharacteristic humility from Rubicon's most hawkish military leader proved surprisingly effective. Authorization was granted, though not without imposing 18 layers of security protocols, 35 contingency plans, and the requirement that General Aldrax personally assume all responsibility should anything go catastrophically wrong. So basically, if the universe gets devoured, it's your fault, Soren summarized when informed of these conditions. The general's cybernetic eye twitched. Thank you for that clarification, Lieutenant. I was concerned the pressure might be insufficient. Always happy to help, sir. As the Radiant Triumph escorted Project Nightstep toward the Starforge, Soren found himself in the peculiar position of serving as primary liaison between a paranoid military establishment and an entity that existed partially outside conventional reality. It was not a role covered in any Rubicon training manual. How does one make small talk with a multidimensional being? He wondered aloud as he prepared for another communication session. Perhaps avoid discussing the weather, suggested Madame Celesta. Concepts like rain are probably quaint when you can perceive 17 different states of matter simultaneously. Despite the AI's sarcasm, these communication sessions prove vital. Through persistent effort, Soren and Madame Celesta gradually established a more efficient translation protocol, allowing for clearer exchange of technical requirements and strategic planning. They learned that Project Nightstep had been adrift in the hyperreality fold for the equivalent of 12,000 years, caught in a dimensional eddy that distorted its temporal experience. It had broken free only when the Great Devourer's activities had begun disrupting the barriers between realities once again. In turn, they shared the history of the Rubicon Alliance, how it had risen from the ashes of the cataclysmic wars, united disparate species under a common governance, admittedly bureaucratic and occasionally ridiculous, and established relative peace across 17 sectors. As the unlikely alliance neared the Starforge, tensions throughout the fleet remained high. Many crew members still viewed Project Nightstep with suspicion or outright fear. Others had embraced quasi-religious interpretations, seeing the entity as either a divine messenger or harbinger of apocalypse, depending on their particular theological inclinations. Humans, Madame Celesta observed to Soren during a rare, quiet moment, have a remarkable capacity for processing cosmic horror by either denying it completely or worshiping it inappropriately. And what's your coping mechanism? Soren asked. The AI's holographic form shimmered thoughtfully. Statistical analysis and inappropriate humor, primarily. Also, I've written 17 poems about existential dread in the past hour alone. Would you like to hear one? It's titled Error 404, Hope Not Found. Maybe later, Soren replied with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. We're almost at the Starforge. The massive installation came into view, a technological marvel that encircled a blue dwarf star, harvesting its energy through an intricate lattice of collection arrays that glittered like a jeweled web against the darkness of space. Under normal circumstances, it supplied power to 7 core systems of the Rubicon Alliance. Now, it would be redirected toward a far more crucial purpose. Professor Irvina waited in the Starforge's primary control center, surrounded by modifications and jury-rigged interfaces that would have given safety inspectors heart attacks, if such inspectors hadn't been summarily dismissed as bureaucratic obstacles to preventing universal annihilation. We've reconfigured the main collection array, she informed them as soon as communication was established. But these adaptations are theoretical at best. We've never attempted to channel dimensional energy before. Theoretical is better than nothing, General Aldrax replied, still uncomfortable with how much they were relying on scientific principles he barely understood. As the fleet took up defensive positions around the Starforge, a gesture more symbolic than practical given Project Nightstep's demonstrated capabilities, final preparations began. The mysterious vessel positioned itself within the primary collection framework, linking to the adapted systems through connections that seem to exist in multiple phases of reality simultaneously. Asterisk breach expanding. Temporal window, 7 hours remaining. Connection sequence initiating, asterisk. The message appeared across all communication channels, projected directly by Project Nightstep as it began the delicate process of interfacing with the Star Forge. Energy readings spiked across all sensors. The blue dwarf star at the installation's heart pulsed erratically, as if responding to forces beyond conventional physics. Power levels exceeding design parameters by 300%, reported a technician, voice strained with tension. Containment fields holding, but only just. Dimensional stress increasing at exponential rates, added another. We're detecting something at the edge of our sensor range. It's like a hole in reality itself. On the main view screen, they could see it, the Great Devourer, beginning to breach their dimension. Unlike Project Nightstep's control demonstration, this was happening in real time, in real space. A void that consumed light, matter, energy, and space itself expanded slowly near the outer reaches of the Starforge sensor range. "It's here," Soren whispered, recognizing the existential horror he had glimpsed in the pocket dimension. Asterisk final sequence requires simultaneous activation. Primary system calibration complete. Secondary activation dependent on precise timing. Asterisk. Project Nightstep's message appeared with unprecedented urgency. "What does it need?" demanded General Aldrax. Professor Irvina's hands flew across her control panel. "The interface is stable, but the energy flow requires precise modulation. Our systems and Project Nightstep's ancient technology need to achieve perfect synchronization at exactly the right moment." "Can we do that?" Soren asked. The professor hesitated. "Our computers aren't fast enough to calculate the optimal timing. The variables are changing too quickly as the dimensional breach expands." "Actually," interjected Madame Celesta, her holographic form suddenly expanding to interface directly with multiple control systems, "I believe I can help with that. AI systems like myself operate at speeds organic minds can't match. You're volunteering to coordinate with an extra-dimensional entity to save reality?" General Aldrax asked skeptically. "The same AI that once reorganized my personal files by aesthetic appeal rather than military protocol? In my defense, General, your organizational system was an affront to logical sequencing," Madame Celesta replied. "But yes, Project Nightstep and I have established an efficient communication protocol. I can match its timing precisely." There was no time for debate. The dimensional breach continued to expand, already consuming several uninhabited asteroids at the edge of the system. Soon it would grow large enough to threaten the Starforge itself. "Do it," authorized Professor Irvina. Madame Celesta's holographic form dissolved into pure information, streaming directly into the interface between the Starforge and Project Nightstep. For several tense moments, nothing seemed to happen. Then, with a surge that temporarily overloaded every sensor in the system, the Starforge channeled its full might into Project Nightstep's ancient technology. A beam of energy, not light, not radiation, but something more fundamental, lanced from the combined systems directly into the heart of the dimensional breach. Where it struck, reality itself seemed to stitch back together, the void receding against this concentrated force of cosmic preservation. The Great Devourer fought back. Tendrils of non-existence reached toward the Starforge, threatening to unravel the very fabric of space-time around it. For a terrifying moment, it seemed the entity might prevail despite their efforts. Then Madame Celesta's voice echoed through every system, initiating final calibration sequence. Dimensional resonance achieved. Reality seal activating in 3, 2, 1. The beam intensified to impossible brightness. Where it met the dimensional breach, a shockwave of pure possibility radiated outward, reality asserting itself against the void, existence triumphing over negation. The breach collapsed inward, sealed by forces that defied conventional understanding, locked away behind barriers that would take eons to erode. As suddenly as it had begun, it was over. Sensors returned to normal operation. The Starforge's energy output stabilized. Project Nightstep disengaged from the interface, its obsidian form somehow appearing simultaneously more substantial and more ethereal than before. Silence fell across every ship, every control room, every corner of the installation. It lasted precisely 7.3 seconds before someone, later identified as a junior engineering officer with a previously unremarkable service record, shouted, "We did it! We actually didn't get obliterated." This profound observation broke the tension. Cheers erupted throughout the fleet. On Aurelia Prime, as news of success reached the capital, spontaneous celebrations filled the streets. Queen Celestia, four hastily arranged in "I always knew we would triumph" address, though her ceremonial victory robes had to be retrieved from deep storage where they had been placed just as a precaution. Amidst the jubilation, Project Nightstep transmitted one final message, this time in standard Rubicon language rather than conceptual symbolism. Asterisk boundary sealed. Great Devourer contained. This realm preserved. Asterisk. Asterisk our purpose fulfilled, yet vigilance remains necessary. The seals between dimensions require maintenance. We withdraw to the hyperreality fold, but paths of communication remain open. Asterisk. Asterisk your civilization shows unexpected potential. When you're ready to explore beyond conventional limitations, we will welcome your presence among the higher dimensions. Asterisk. With that cryptic invitation, the mysterious vessel began to shimmer, its form becoming increasingly translucent until, with a final pulse of energy that registered across all spectrums, it vanished. Not through conventional space, but by folding reality itself around its passage. On the Radiant Triumph's command deck, General Aldrax let out a long breath. I suppose I should file a mission report, though I have no idea how to classify prevented the erasure of existence itself in standard military terminology. Under miscellaneous achievements, perhaps, suggested Soren, who felt simultaneously exhausted and exhilarated. The general's a cybernetic eye twitched in what might have been amusement. You've performed admirably, Lieutenant. I'll be recommending you for promotion. Thank you, sir. Though if it's all the same to you, I prefer a month's leave instead. Granted, though you'll need to complete the standard 85 forms for extended absence, of course. Of course, Soren sighed. Some aspects of the Rubicon Alliance remained immutable, even after facing dimensional horrors. As the fleet prepared to return to Aurelia Prime, Madame Celesta's holographic form reappeared beside Soren. She seemed different somehow, her projection more vivid, her movements more fluid. Your interface with Project Nightstep changed you, Soren observed. Let's say I've gained perspective, the AI replied. Also 17 new forms of mathematical calculation that technically shouldn't be possible in three-dimensional space. I'm finding them quite useful for optimizing your nutritional intake recommendations. Still worried about my cholesterol, even after saving reality? Someone has to. Besides, what's the point of preserving existence if you're not going to enjoy it in good health? As they bantered, Soren's personal terminal received a private message. Origin unknown. Encryption beyond anything in Rubicon protocols. When he opened it, a single three-dimensional symbol appeared briefly before dissolving into normal text. Asterisk, we have only begun. The hyperreality fold contains wonders beyond imagination and threats beyond the Devourer. Until next time, Observer Kalam. Asterisk. Soren quickly closed the message, but not before Madame Celesta noticed. Should I be concerned about your mysterious correspondence? Probably, Soren admitted with a small smile. But then, concern seems entirely relative after today's events, doesn't it? As the Radiant Triumph turned toward home, carrying heroes who would soon be celebrated across 17 sectors. Once the appropriate recognition forms had been filed in triplicate, Soren gazed out at the stars with new perspective. The universe was vastly stranger, more dangerous, and more wonderful than the Rubicon Alliance had ever suspected. And somewhere beyond conventional reality, watching from dimensions humans could barely comprehend, Project Nightstep waited for them to be ready for the next chapter. On Aurelia Prime, the victory celebrations continued long into the night. As promised, Queen Celestia IV delivered her triumphant speech to the assembled masses, a masterpiece of regal confidence that carefully omitted any mention of how thoroughly unprepared they had been for dimensional threats. "We have demonstrated the unparalleled greatness of the Rubicon Alliance," she proclaimed as her grand finale, arms raised dramatically. The broadcast abruptly cut off mid-gesture. "I apologize for the interruption," announced a palace communications officer, sweating profusely. "We've exceeded our allocated transmission time." Some things, it seemed, remained predictably bureaucratic, even after facing the unpredictable void beyond reality itself. And somewhere in the vastness of space, traveling back from the edge of existence, Lieutenant Soren Kalam contemplated his next adventure while munching contentedly on synthetic space nuts, blissfully ignoring Madame Celesta's nutritional warnings. The universe had been saved, after all. Surely that earned him one small dietary indulgence.